What's up, you guys? Welcome to this episode of Crystal Clear. I have a fun special guest on today, Holli De Valle. She is a craniosacral therapist here in Sarasota, Bradenton area. But so much more.
I know, it's hard to compile it.
It really is. I feel like the social media world know her as the holistic alchemist.
Yes.
And that's actually how I found you. I started following you a while ago and love
so cool.
everything you put out there. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I am excited to just open up this platform for you to talk about all of the wonderful work that you do, your experience, how you got into this, and, whatever you feel pulled to share with us today.
Awesome. Well, I guess we can start with how I got into this. And
Yeah.
So I think we talked a little bit about it before, but essentially I had a reaction to a shot that my body was just like not agreeing with. And I really think that honestly, there was a lot of other nervous system dysregulation, a lot of trauma stuff that was already in my system. And that was like the straw that broke the camel's back. I didn't know it at the time. It took me like 4 years to figure out that was like the thing that began to change things. But it was like this rapid period where I went from, I sold timeshare in Central Florida and I was a top rep and I made 6 figures and I owned my own home at 24 and I was active and healthy. I thought-ish. I was drinking and going out and, which
all the
was
things
not
we did
really,
at that age.
Yeah, but like that was not really me either. So there was a lot of like masking and just trying to stuff down and go through a really hard transition at that time and push through and be like everyone else. Because I wasn't the kind of person that could just drink and then wake up at 5 and go to work like when we just got in at 2. Like I'm like, no, I need to rest for a week. And my friends would call me like grandma at 20 because I was like, if we're going to go out on Friday, we have to go out on Friday. I need the whole weekend to recuperate.
And can we start at 2 p.m.?
Yeah.
Because
so
I'm
like
more
if
of that girl.
Yes. So if I looked at that, I can see there was definite, like I look at my face back then, there was definite things where I was disconnected to my body. But that was definitely the thing that just threw me over the edge. And within 2 months, I had gone through where I had just lost 40 pounds. I was constantly in the bathroom. I was nauseous all the time. I had no appetite. And that was weird because I am a girl that loves to eat.
And this is after the vaccine
Yes.
that you got. Okay.
And it was just kind of like so depressing because I loved to cook and suddenly I had no desire to cook. I had zero appetite. Things that I used to love were just, they didn't even feel right in my mouth. Like I literally just, it was just a struggle. And I watched my body fall apart and doctors not have an answer for me. So I was going through all the traditional medical, Blue Cross Blue Shield, had great insurance. And doctors were still like, I don't know, after doing multiple tests, at least I could rule out some heavy autoimmune things.
Right.
But then at that time, and this was in 2012, I was just left with no answers. And it must be IBS. And that's pretty much what they tell you when they don't have an answer for you, after you get psychosomatic and, all the other things, anxiety. And so I was left to my own devices, like many people, and they find their own road. And honestly, that I look at now as like the black box. And that's why I named myself Holistic Alchemist or put that name for my business, because I really feel that was a pivotal moment in my journey that sucked. If there was ever a time that I had like a huge black cloud over my life, it was then. It was like I felt like I just didn't want to be here anymore because how was this going to get any better? But I grew up believing that was not an option either. And I just remember like crying to God, like, but how could you just not want me? I just want to be home with you. Like I was so just sad. And my like former self was gone and I was grieving that. And there was nobody to even understand. Like my family didn't even understand. Like I remember going to get massages and my dad, and he apologizes for this now, but him being like, massages are luxury. Like, what do you said you don't feel good, but you're getting massages. And I'm like, I'm just trying to feel better, which at that time was nervous system regulating to a degree. And it would allow me to feel a little bit of hunger. Anyhow, so my path led me to finding a craniosacral therapist. I'd never heard of it. And I thought it sounded pretty ridiculous. Oh, I looked it up. It was put a weight of a nickel on, certain parts of your body, and suddenly you have like emotional releases and you remember, and I'm like, what? Okay, let me try, because I had nothing to lose. And I tried chiropractic. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that just didn't hit the spot.
Mm-hmm.
So I went in for my first session and she explained to me, like, it's not a one and done kind of thing. So if you can, we need to kind of come up with a plan that you can stick to, that you can afford. And so we did that. We came up with like a 2-month plan of me going to see her weekly. My first session, I had an emotional release, which not everybody does. That doesn't mean it's not working. Everybody's body does what it needs to. But for me, I think I was so raw and ready, and she was such a container of holding space for me. I had no idea why I was crying. And I was not a crier. I was like the opposite of a crier. So that was really weird for me to be opening up like that vulnerably with somebody I didn't know. And she didn't have any. I remember being like, do you know what it was tied to? You kind of, I realized the people on my table, they kind of expect and want you to know.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get to that in a little bit, how I think that's something that we
It's
don't
not
need to be
necessarily
a part
trigger
of.
point. It's,
Yeah.
it's
And we
different than-
don't sometimes have to be. I think that's part of the beauty of it, is that the practitioner isn't supposed to necessarily know, because your body's speaking a language. And I think a lot of times we as people even can understand not wanting to be perceived or ill-perceived or not taken the right way. And there's so much, even in the English language, there's so many words that we just still don't have in our vocabulary. So you can imagine that the body's holding on to things that we don't even know how to express. So talk therapy only goes so far. And it's not for the practitioner to be like, oh, this is what's going, in my personal opinion. Yeah. Not to say I don't get intuitive hits, but I think that can do as much, we'll call it damage, as somebody in a white coat telling somebody that like they only have X amount and they're not going to get better or whatever, because that holds a certain amount of power that people give. And we're not the healers, we're just the conduits. So anyhow, she held that space. I had a release and I left her office with an appetite for the first time in 4 months.
Oh, wow.
And that was huge for me. So I thought, okay, because the doctors hadn't been able to, there was no medicine for appetite, gaining. Right. And I'm like, okay, so let's continue this. And within 4 sessions, I was like 70% back to, I was able to like get a job again. Like I hadn't been able to work. I had just, I was selling things just to pay my mortgage just because I couldn't work. So that was huge for me. And that was a moment where I left her office going, I need to know how you do this. Where did you go to school? How did you learn about this? Because this is what I meant to do. I just knew it. I left there going, this is it. This is what everybody doesn't realize, that their body can actually heal itself. And so since then, I've realized it's a lot about your nervous system capacity. And so where that threshold is for everybody and where their weak point is varies. And now that I've had my son and I work with babies and children, I have a whole new viewpoint of craniosacral therapy and how important it is. And I can see how those compensation patterns are things we even come into life with sometimes. And if those are not worked out, these literally become the places that our body hold on to tension, etc. And compensation patterns. This is where things can really begin to get bad for people later in life too. So being able to help our kids with that when they're younger, my goodness, just unraveling the nervous system and bringing that baseline down from a much earlier standpoint.
And what do you like working with babies and children? Like, what are your observations, like the more trends of observations with that? Like, what is it that where are they holding on to? Like, what is it releasing for them? Is there even a way to kind of pinpoint that?
That's such a great question. I would say number one for every person, no matter what age, is diaphragm, in their main diaphragm. We have a couple different diaphragms, and I'm talking about where we actually breathe. And normally we see babies and we're like, oh, breathe like a baby. You see their belly rise and fall. But a lot of the babies that I'm dealing with, they're dealing with oral restrictions, which I remember when I was having breastfeeding issues, my mom being like, what is this? We never had this in our family. What are all these, we never heard of these oral ties before. And I think there's an epigenetic factor to that. And the fascia is getting tighter and tighter on the generations. And so now our children are starting to show it in their mouths. The tongue is connected to the main fascial line that goes from tongue to toe. So that's going right through the midsection here of all their internal organs. And so I would say not even just like diaphragm where they're breathing, but just this entire midsection from pelvic diaphragm to actual diaphragm. There tends to be, amongst a lot of the babies, a lot of restriction. And it could be because, we're in a position for so long and it needs to be stretched out. I mean, we have to learn where we are in space and time in this body, in this, now here we are. So, yeah.
That's really interesting. Actually, I had a lot of trouble with my first baby, my daughter. She was tongue-tied, and so she had latching issues. So I tried these like nipple guards and all.
God,
It
I
was a
went through
pain in
that
the ass.
too.
So
Yeah.
I gave up after like 3.5 months,
Yeah.
4 months, and it was sad because like I always, it's like you go back and you mom guilt yourself. Like she was fed formula and the formula is shit. I didn't know about the goat milk formula at the time. Like this was like 15 years ago. Like, oh my God. She's fine, by the way. She's great. She turned out okay.
Yeah,
Like
everything's
if you're
good,
if you're doing all the things, don't worry. They'll be fine.
Of course.
But it's interesting that you say that because I know a lot of people. It's like very trendy now for all of these different ties, whether it's a lip tie or a tongue tie, and it's interesting because the diaphragm stuff, I feel like every time I go for a massage, I'm like, can you please just get under my ribs, like dig in, like I need to release because I can feel it everywhere in my body when my diaphragm is released.
Yes. That's so great that you say that and that you ask for that. I can remember being in massage therapy school and we were learning about abdominal massage, and I was like, don't touch me.
Same.
I did not want that, which tells me a lot now.
Right.
But yeah, because that's really where, that's where my first symptom hit, was in my diaphragm, right where my ribs connect, where I thought I was getting punched in the stomach, that feeling of I can't breathe. That's how I woke up. And I'm like, something is wrong. And I was going to everything's fine. It's in your head. I'm like, no, it's not. But my diaphragm had not been properly being used for a long time and holding a lot of tension.
Taught how to breathe.
Not taught how to breathe.
We're not taught how to breathe.
Posture, we're holding in, even just from like a heart space trauma, like we're protective. It's very like concave. And we've got the trendy, like stick your butt out if all of that is really like
gymnast.
Positioning.
So my body was a whole, like, I still have to it's like, okay, so how do I stand? Like in alignment, how do I sit? How do I stand now? Yeah. But I do feel like I still have that tendency to like tighten everything all the time. And that's why I'm like I can't even take a deep breath.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're hypermobile, it's also a whole thing because if you're tightening your knees, you're doing such with your pelvis. It's like a constant, I'm realizing, conscious awareness of how my body is standing in space and time. And this is the kind of thing that I deal with now with children with primitive reflexes and with craniosacral, because we weren't taught these things. Our bodies weren't taught these things. Like, if a child is clumsy, that's not how our bodies are designed. If a human is clumsy, period. But a child, we can help adults too. But it's just like, that's not normal. But we look at it like, oh, Sally Sue is clumsy. That's cute. And we've just kind of knocked these things off as like everybody's been individual, which we are. Yeah. But we are innately designed and we're not supposed to be that way. So if that's happening, or if we're snoring or grinding our teeth, and that's a big thing with children now. So forget, if you're not dealing with the latch issue or the tongue tie issue or the oral tie issue when they're a baby, which I'll tell you, it doesn't seem to matter from what I'm seeing in my practice, whether you have the most holistic birthing experience, journey, or you are completely on the other end of the spectrum, both babies are dealing with restrictions. So this tells me there's something more going on, and it started before this time. But that being said, if you're not catching them when they're babies, it's becoming an airway issue. So if you have a baby who is colicky, that's not normal. But pediatricians will tell you it's fine. They'll grow out of it. They don't grow out of it. That compensation pattern will begin because the body's smart, and it'll overcome and adapt.
And so what are you seeing with the colicky? Like what would your, like from a craniosacral standpoint, because I actually just have a girlfriend that really dealt with a colicky baby for like 4. It was brutal, still a bit brutal on her. I think she's wearing out. So just curious, just to, put it out there. What are some things, like how have you seen the turnaround in that in your practice?
So colicky babies will tend to have restriction like in that midsection area, and that's why they're colicky. So and they adjust so quickly. I mean, usually between 3 and 4 sessions, a baby's able to unwind that fascially. And that's really all that needs to take place, because all of that is that like projectile spit up, like that not being able to. Like a
sphincter thing, like it's just like stuck?
Somewhat, but it's not even that. It's really just, it's it's kind of hard to describe, but the fascia is all connected like a web,
Right.
but it's literally just needing to be, there's certain stretches and things that we just have to incorporate and move the fascia around. And then just in craniosacral alone, because with babies, I'm doing a lot more stretching and whatnot than I'm doing on my adults.
Right.
But just in craniosacral alone, there is the cerebrospinal fluid, which is what we're working on getting to work properly. That is, it's going into the peripheral nerves. So that's going through the connective tissue, the fascia. So it naturally unwinds just by focusing on where that rhythm is off. And oftentimes, you know, if they've gone through the vaginal canal, the, you know,
Like, could you imagine? Like, I mean, let's just
What's
pause for a moment.
what's going
Like,
through
we are
their
squeezed
minds?
through vaginas.
Yes.
Like, and are we coming out straight and narrow?
Yeah,
No,
right.
we're all misaligned.
Right.
Like, could you imagine? Like,
and like the you know, the bones are meant to overlap so that they can go through and then naturally settle back down. But sometimes fascial restrictions will keep that from going where it needs to go. And, you know, you'll overcome and adapt, but at what degree of variation? And we're just dealing with like multiple, you know, generations down, and we're seeing like what is going on. And even behaviorally, because we're getting into like what is going on. I'm giving my kid all the right things and they're still, you know, I don't understand. I'm like, yeah, I get it. I've been there.
like,
What's going
neural
on
disconnects
is,
because of-
especially if they, so my son ended up being a C-section, not the plan.
It's okay. We go with what we have to do. We'll surrender to the flow.
Right. But it's so funny because I so much was like, oh, I did all the right things. And this is, I'm going to avoid the C-section because I did all the right things. And then my body, probably fascially not opening up, was not dilating. I was not progressing. I think I was honestly scared and I could not see how that was going to happen. And I wasn't allowing that to happen. That being said, what in the heck was going on in his mind during that time? Where was he positioned? Was he like, he was like this so much outside of the womb that I kept thinking, this is why why we weren't going anywhere. His hand was on his face. He couldn't get through.
He was snug and right. He wasn't ready yet, Mom.
Yeah, like maybe, I don't know, all the things. But we ended up, I had all the notes. Everybody in the hospital knows we're not doing blah, 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 blah. And so the doctor, God love him, trying to go by my birth plan, was like, okay, we're going to try to do this naturally. So we'll do a vacuum. Knowing what I know now, I would never. We did that 3 times. Yeah. And nobody tells you that the fetal monitoring that they put you on in the hospital is actually putting a tiny little screw into your baby's scalp in order to, did you know this? You can actually look this. My midwife came back in later and was like, yeah, they had already done it. And you're in the middle of, I couldn't tell you then. But when he came out, he had a hematoma on his head. So we have the little fetal monitoring. They go in with a little, like,
is this for the vacuum?
Or this is when you're in the hospital and they put that belt around your belly and they put something inside you at that point when you're like in labor. So they don't tell you what they're doing. They're actually going through and like pinning a little screw into your child's head. That's how they're testing.
Oh, God.
So,
and why
and then
they have to tell you that?
I guess they feel that if they were to tell you that, you'd probably say no. And they feel that that's the only way they can do it. You know, like I don't really know. I just remember my midwife, I mean, we had gone through a really long labor and I had 2 midwives, doula, like my whole birth team was there, but she must have stopped out for a minute and was like, I don't have the heart to tell you this. Like I came back and this was done. And now, so she told me afterwards, because he had a hematoma on his head after we vacuumed him 3 times after they did that. So that was pretty horrific to deal with. And I had no idea, as much as I loved craniosacral therapy, and I was in the healing field at that time, that it could do for babies what would have been, I mean, just the healing from the trauma that he went through, much less, you know, for his brain stem even, and just the blood flow that's going in, much less all of the latch issues. Like he has still cheek ties that we're going to have to deal with now because you know, we didn't do circumcision. We didn't do certain things. So I was like, well, I'm not going to go get a laser done. Like, you know, I'll just pump. It's fine. I'll go. I had no idea how important it was to do those things. He did get over his lip tie. The tongue tie is better now. And we've been doing exercises, but his cheek ties at this point, he's 5.5. We'll have to probably put him under in order to do that. Because at this point, we need to get his palate expanded, which I can do some through craniosacral and we can invite the bones to move and all of that. But honestly, unless I'm working on him, you know, multiple times a week and it's a consistent practice, we're going to need some outside things like myofunctional therapy and an expanded palate. And in order to get the palate expander, he has to wear a mouth guard thing to start off with at night. And
So
it's
that's
not,
why
it's
you
going to
have
bother
use
his
a tie.
cheeks.
Oh.
So it's like, oh my goodness, if I had just known it was going to be so much of a big deal. But the thing is that if your child is mouth breathing and grinding their teeth, snoring, these are all red flags that they are mouth breathing all the time. And maybe you don't notice it in the daytime. A lot of us adults are even, but we're drinking and talking. And the tongue is supposed to be sealed to the roof of the mouth from like right where that ridge is, where you can feel that all the way back. Like the way it would be if you were to swallow.
I'm doing it now.
I know, like you notice it. But a lot of people are like, oh my God, I never thought about my tongue is sitting like on the floor of my mouth. So our palates are learning how to shape based on where we're putting our tongue. So if our kids are mouth breathing and they're like, that palate is going like this and it's going up into their nose.
Interesting.
So when you do a palate expansion, you're literally bringing all of these facial bones out.
Okay.
Which, you know, I know you've probably heard that our jaws have been shrinking over the last 100 years.
Yeah.
And food is definitely a component because we're not chewing as much.
We're not chewing. Everything's soft food or
Right.
like shakes and
Right.
like we're supposed to be chewing. That's why we have teeth. Like
Yes.
like
And
we're not
speaking
supposed to be
of-
having applesauce out of pouches all the time. We're supposed to be biting apples.
Yes, yeah,
Like, and strengthening our master.
Yes,
Like,
yeah, exactly.
and the facial muscles.
100%.
I mean, not to mention the inflammation. Everyone has round faces now, but
Yeah, and lymphatic drainage, like all
Yeah.
of it plays into that. Yeah. And
interesting.
yeah,
My
and
son definitely grinds his teeth and he does snore. I have to bring him to see you.
yeah.
And he loves stuff like this. He's like
Yeah.
a bougie little guy. He's like, okay, do all
I
the
love
things.
it. He's like, I'm used to
Yeah.
it. That's so good.
Yeah.
But also just, you know, in orthodontics and dental practices.
Well, I was going to ask you what your perspective is from a craniosacral perspective on braces, because my someone I've seen for craniosacral therapy, I was talking about scoliosis with her,
Mhm.
and she's like, actually, you know, do they have braces? And I'm like, yes. She's like, well, it's, you know, one can lead to the other. I'm like, what?
Interesting. So
Because we're having such a I mean, I feel like every I would say probably 3 out of 5 of my daughter's friends, she's 15 years old, has had some form of scoliosis. But they've also all had braces. So it's, but I feel like everyone's had braces at this point. So are we just doing that? Is it necessary? And what are the causes and effects of shifting our palates and our teeth at that adolescent, such a pivotal age when our hormones are going crazy?
Oh,
Like,
that
is this
too.
the time?
That too. I think that's probably a whole other discussion that I hadn't even thought of, but is relevant. But as far as, so, I mean, I had braces, like
Yeah,
everybody
same.
had braces.
Yeah.
And at the time, luckily I grew up and it was like cool to have braces.
Yeah,
I was
same.
like, this is great. I don't know if it's still that way now or not, but regardless, there's a lot of, I didn't have teeth pulled, but I know that there are a lot of people who've had braces who had to have teeth pulled in order to get the braces to do the things. With or without the teeth pulling is just adding to the component, but there's nowhere else in the body that we're restraining to say, okay, this is how we're going to help grow.
Right.
And we wouldn't do that. And when you think about the cranial bones, including the teeth, it's all meant to shift. It all does shift. It has its own breath. If we're restricting the teeth, you're restricting the cranium. And if there are malalignments or malocclusions in the mouth, there's misalignments going on in the cranium. So by just doing here to make it cosmetically look pretty, you're not addressing the root. And in fact, now you've almost solidified,
fired things up essentially.
Yeah, where you've kind of like fused in a way, not to say because things don't fuse, but like you've made it where the body has now learned to have compensation patterns to form to this restriction plus permanent retainers.
Right.
So I don't know if you know the girl who played on 50 Shades of Grey. I don't remember her. Zoe something. She used to have a space between her teeth. And she has no space now. And apparently people were like, oh, I love the space. What'd you do? And she was on a talk show talking about that she was having severe neck pain. And she went to her dentist and her dentist said, let's take the permanent retainer out. And when she took the permanent retainer out, her neck pain went away and the gap closed. Because that gap was something that was trying to close in order to...
Interesting.
And it hadn't been the whole time. So like people are realizing that if they're getting their tongue ties done as adults even. Now, I would never recommend this to an adult or a child without doing body work. I think that's half of it. There's a lot of people out there going, oh, I did the tongue tie, I did the lip tie, we're good. the body is wise and it's going to try to build scar tissue to fix what just happened. So now if you're not doing the body work to help unwind what originally was connecting that entire thing, because it wasn't just right there, you are going to have still that unwinding that's still going to be there. So that's why sometimes people will be like, well, I had a tongue tie revision done, but my child is having issues now and it's been a couple of months and they're still, I'm like, well, did you get body work done? No.
Well, because they're not prescribing that along with it. I think this is where the disconnect is with, where holistic meets Western, Eastern meets Western. Like, I love that we have so many more options now, but I really admire those Western practitioners that are bringing in the alternative methods to really boost. And I don't think it's intentional. It's a lack of education on understanding, because they're not taught. Like if you're an orthodontist, you learn how to straighten teeth.
100%.
You're not learning the craniosacral that goes along with it. And so it's no one's fault here. I just want to make that clear.
Yes, 100%.
It's just educate. But this is why we do this, right? This is the whole intention of this podcast, is getting these different amazing modalities out there to let people understand that, hey, there's a little bit more to this. I mean, even I'm one of those person, I don't get headaches. I know if I get a headache, something's going on. 100%. So what do? I book my body work. I book my cranio. I book my, you book all the modalities to see what's going on. And it's like, oh, did I get a good night's sleep? Am I drinking enough water?
100%. I mean, I was just going to go back. Have you been hydrating?
Yeah. Have I been hydrating? Like what week of the month is it?
Yeah, are there flowers in bloom? Just.
Right.
Yeah. It's all the things that really do make a difference. And that is why, because like if you have allergies, you've got fascial bands that are going around your cranium. And sometimes with inflammation, they're going to tighten. And that's why people will be like, oh, I really just like feel it in my neck. Yeah, because it's literally wrapping around. And babies are feeling that too.
Right.
So, and
they're not excluded from the equation just because they're not old enough to complain about this congestion.
Right. And like a lot of, and I know I get it. Like if we have multiple children and you have things you have to do, you're in and out of the car, they're in a chair at the house because you've got things you're doing.
Right.
But if they're not getting enough time to stretch out their bodies, this is why we'll often see that they're, if they're hating the car seat, that's why, because
it's just uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable. And it's not just going to be like one little, like, oh, stretch and you're good. But it's that continuation that allows the body to go, oh my gosh, there's room. And that's huge. It's really more about the fascial connection in the body that has to know there's space. And once that happens, the brain can work with the body a lot better. And there's a big thing that's happening now too with primitive reflexes in our children where, I mean, I don't even know if it's just in our children, because honestly, I think there's a lot of adults still retaining their Moro reflex, which is, if you walk into a room and like that's Moro, that's an infant reflex that should have been integrated. Now, sometimes trauma and other life experiences can bring that back, but we have had no idea that that's something we can also easily fix. Like every person should be on the ground crawling, even every adult. It's like, I know that sounds silly, but it literally does benefits for the brain, and it can give you a brain reset just to cross body movement, doing it the right way, having your eyes look up. Like we have just
there's so much strategy that goes along with that. And I remember people saying, oh yeah, my son never crawled. They just went straight to walking. I'm like, I don't think there's an important step there.
Yeah.
It's the critical thinking. It's the depth perception. It's the, the alignment, knowing where, like, even again, the mechanical coordination of, so I guess I just need to start crawling more.
Yeah. No, and it's so
but
good. It's very important.
It's good for our bodies.
I have to say,
a lot of bear poses in yoga, you guys.
It's so true.
A lot of bear.
And I think that if my son had done that, he didn't, but had he, I would have been right there with them. Like, oh my God, my baby's so smart. Like, he didn't even need to crawl. Look at him. He's on his way.
Right.
Like,
we don't know.
Know. And they're developing fine otherwise. It's not like they're not, because again, it's not that it's a problem. There's nothing wrong.
Right.
But there is something that they're missing. Yeah. And that's a huge red flag neurodevelopmentally, just even for sensory processing and all that kind of stuff later. The CDC took out crawling as a milestone, I think, like 2 years ago?
Don't get me started on the CDC 2 years ago.
Which is oh my gosh.
We're not going to go there.
Oh you're like, not today. We don't have enough time. But but that's a big thing, because obviously if they're not crawling, we're missing things. So, I just went to a conference held by an airway dentist in Sarasota this past year. She held for a lot of different practitioners, but just because she's trying to get the word out, like even if you're a teacher, if you're noticing these things with your students, we need to get more eyes on the fact that primitive reflexes are a simple thing that we can integrate. And there's a lot of us that are walking around without them being integrated. And it's affecting how we're walking and behaving and
thinking
handling the world and nervous
even
system.
Nervous system. But if you're breathing through your mouth 80% of the time, you're not getting the amount of oxygen to your brain that you need. Like this is,
No, and the body thinks that you're under a lot of stress.
Right. And when it creates that stress, because it's like you're, even like, it's like we're breathing like little puppies.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's like this new rabbit hole that I never knew that I was going to go down just because my life was changed by craniosacral so long ago. But
it's so intriguing and so important just to understand. Like my husband just got deviated septum surgery a month and a half ago. And he's like, I feel like I've been sick ever since. And I'm like, I think you need to get work done because you probably have there's trauma that's occurred there.
Yeah.
And actually have a good friend of mine who I think you've met within the past month or so, who's kind of going into that realm for herself, but just learning like how to drain and getting your sinuses and like how important it is to have your facial muscles and not to mention our necks at this day and age. Like we all have that head forward posture. We're looking 100%. Down at things all the time. So what are the biggest trends that you're seeing? Even behaviorally, we talked about children who are teeth grinding and snoring but I feel like, there's a lot of different opinions and perspectives on this, but ADHD and all these other things. It's like, well, could that be the lack of oxygen too? Could that
it could be. So I think that, I've been on like a whole journey over the last couple of years of rediscovering what neurodivergence is. And so I think my opinion of it has shifted quite a bit. And I'm hoping to help be like this bridge between understandings, because I think I used to be like hardcore on this other side, where now I'm like, oh, maybe it's not necessarily this, but it's so much more complex and nuanced than that. But do I think that we are seeing things that look like ADHD that may not really be ADHD?
Just be sensory processing, honestly. Not that, obviously everything has a spectrum and a scale, and so not discounting any sort of diagnosis. I just want to make that clear. But just from my own perspective as a mother, watching my little guy who was born in 2020, but never went to daycare, and I was really cautious about what I allowed in his body for his first few years of life and everything like that. But like, he didn't really start speaking until he was 3, clearly. So I'm like, is it parasites? Is it because you see so much out there?
You see so much.
And like certain sensory. And I'm like, I think it's just, there's more to it. I still feel like there's more to it.
There is. And I think at the end of the day, whether it's just sensory processing or ADHD or wherever it happens to be, I think the end of the day is how can we make it where you are most comfortable in your body?
Right.
And I don't think any of that will matter if you're just looking at nervous system regulation is going to help all of that first off. And that's really, it's like the baseline for people who have, autism sensory like it's like right here. Their threshold is right here. So noise and things going out of the way, not the way they planned, all of that, the wrong look, things can just be so, they're so sensitive and able to perceive so much, and it can be so overwhelming. So, even just the lights, and just what environment are they in all day, and can they, even in their home, are they able to express who they really are and be loved? Because I think that's a big part of it too, is that there's this feeling that if we've got to help our kids, but it can come across as needing to fix them.
Right.
And when we have some type of moment where maybe through a parasite cleanse or something, not to say that those aren't valid, but that where we start to see things shift, I think that we need to be very careful not to make sure that they don't feel that they are any less loved.
Right.
If they're not, however they are, when we think they're doing better. Because I think that perception can be so damaging, because they can't necessarily always know what is going to make them not better, what's going to tick them over the edge. And that feeling of that not being accepted for who they really are, I think, is the hardest part of it. And so I find that translates into my work with
Yeah.
people, adults in general, like we're all just little children who didn't have that space to even know what we were feeling,
Mm-hmm.
name it, process it, move it through. So it
Right.
just stayed there. And then, we become the adults who built our lives over those compensations of like, okay, this is who I was told to be, and I'm going to overcome this. And,
We lose our authenticity that way, or never understand what that means in
yeah,
the first place. And I talk a lot about nervous system regulation and different modalities, but more external things we can do. So
Yeah.
I love that we're having this conversation about more of the body component, like how can we give our bodies permission? Like what modalities can we do to give our bodies permission to let go?
yeah,
Because as we know, things are stored in our body
yeah,
in utero.
yes.
Like we're bringing on mama's energy in utero.
Well, and I don't know if we've talked about this, but your CSF is actually derived from the amniotic fluid.
Right.
So it's like you're literally in that
Yeah.
fluid that then becomes what's inside you.
Right.
I mean, yeah, the imprints of that. So what mom felt, what she went through,
Mm-hmm.
was she supported? Was she alone? Was she scared? Um, all of that plays a really big impact. I think father's DNA obviously plays an impact on those
Right.
things too, but I think epigenetically speaking, the moms are really the ones that I think have a bigger impact on that.
100%. Which is really interesting because I feel like with both my pregnancies, I intuitively knew and just felt like I need to be the most chill version of me right now. I had so
Yes.
much freedom of food and I moved my body and I just
Yeah.
knew I was growing a little human and coming
Yeah.
from someone that had some serious perfectionism paradigm and had to be a certain way and do a certain thing. I'm like, you know what? This is not about me anymore.
I love
And,
that.
I would say soon after they came out, it was a whole different story. And I had my stuff I battled with postpartum, both kids. But it was very interesting, like no anxiety, no, like I was just I just knew like it wasn't about me. It was just
That's so awesome.
the most comfortable. I had very easy going, chill pregnancies, never got sick. It was really interesting.
I love that.
Which I know is not the case for many people. So I'm sorry, I'm not bragging in any way, shape, or form about that.
Just
I
your
just find it
experience.
very interesting that I know mentally how much it allowed me to calm down. Almost like I gave myself that permission to just, and then, they come out 3 months later. It's like, okay, well, why am I not back to where I was? And it's a whole different thing. But it's really interesting because it's like, I almost knew like, this isn't about me. It's about them.
Mm-hmm. I love that you keep saying that you gave yourself permission. I think
I
that's
gave myself,
one of the
I have to
biggest
give myself a
things.
lot of permission these days.
I think giving ourselves permission and grace is probably one of the biggest parts of the healing experience that comes out of all of this, because so much of us hold that we have to be this certain way and we're not allowed to eat that or
feel that way,
yeah,
or be around that person, or do this.
yeah,
And it's like,
just live for the
Right.
moment, like we're here. Part of it is to have that sensory experience. So
Mhm.
whatever it is that you're feeling, or it's just interesting.
Yeah. I talk a lot about giving myself permission. And that's, I think, again, the intent of doing this is like my life is far from lined up and everything. I've just learned to surrender with the flow, right?
Yeah. Yes.
and allow things to, if something falls off, okay, I welcome that empty space.
Yeah.
Instead of like thinking back to when I was a teenager and my early 20s, I had such rigid boundaries for myself. And there was so much rigidity there and so much restriction and so much like what I thought was discipline, but it was really the opposite of that. Like
you were just trying to control.
I was trying to control because I felt so out of control about other things that I had repressed and that I had put down and shit I was carrying from birth that wasn't even mine. And, once you start giving yourself permission to release the shame or release the stuff and like, who cares? My mom was the way she was. Yeah. And, I didn't have your stereotypical suburban, grew up, like in the perfect neighborhood with the perfect, whatever, like that wasn't my life, but who cares? Like that's what made me me. And all of those experiences have led to this awesome experience of being here and talking to you today. And I wouldn't change any of it for the world, but you don't know that when you're 23 years old.
Right. 100%.
So just really, I've I've talked about this before, and I know you and I hinted on it or like touched on it, but I think 5 years ago after I had my son, my husband and I were just like, okay, we're just going to start from the inside out.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously there's things that need to be addressed and discussed. And there's a lot of external factors going on in the world at the time. It was literally shut down.
2020,
that, what can we do to not only improve our mental health, our physical health, our lives, our relationship, like everything needed a revamp.
Yeah.
And craniosacral was a part of that for both of us,
I love that.
along with body work and talk therapy. And for me, like trauma and resiliency, like I learned about PTSD, and I'm like, well, how can I unravel this?
Yeah.
And realizing it went way beyond talk therapy.
Yes.
It went way beyond and understanding things about my body. And if we're going to get into some of, like my right side, I always had injuries on my right side. Well, that was my masculine side.
I was just thinking
the side.
Left for me earlier. Yeah. So that's so funny.
And it was like, that was the side that was always like push and go and drive and determination and understanding your masculine and your feminine energy. And we all have to have that balance. And I feel like for so long, I resisted my feminine energy. And so I kind of want to dive into that a little bit. Like, how do you see that? And what are some shifts you see with yourself and your clients with navigating those energies? Because I know that, the science behind the craniosacral, but there's also an intuitive component there that I would love to hit on because it's just my jam and I love it. And I know a lot of my audience appreciate this aspect as well.
Yeah.
So
I actually really love that question. I love that it just naturally came out because that was a huge shift when I, created my business here, because I did massage and body work up in New Jersey for several years. And I always knew that was like, when I left that woman's office, it was like, how did you become a craniosacral therapist? And she had gone the massage and body work route. So like, that was why I went down that road. But then, to do craniosacral was additional schooling. And I was loving working with the fascia. It was like molding people. I've been like, oh my God, I love this. And I started working with Reiki. So to me, it felt very similar to what I was experiencing. So I stayed with that for a while. And then 2020 hit. We moved from New Jersey down to Florida, no license switching at that time or anything. So like I had taken on, because I had a private practice and the government was paying people to stay home. So my husband was able to, he worked at Massage Envy at the time. So he was able to collect from the government to stay home. I was not. So we had a 10-month-old baby. And if I wanted to get out of New Jersey, which I did, I needed to make sure that we could afford to live here. So I was like, okay, I'll go to work. So I was like working for a roofing company and I was working for a window company, like not that I can't do those things, but gosh, was that such a masculine job? Like, I know that I had asked to see things from a different perspective, but that's not what I meant. I was terrified. I'm like, I have my baby at home and I'm on a roof. But anyhow, that all blew up. And I was just talking about that last night with my husband, like how crazy that was, because that all blew up about 3.5, 4 years ago. And yeah, I guess it was 3.5 years ago. And so it was like that moment where it was like, what are you doing? At that point in time, there were a lot of people experiencing negative reactions to the COVID shot. And I was reaching out to people all over the world because I know how bad and helpless and depressed and scared I felt when I didn't have answers. And I felt like my body was failing me. It was screaming for me I just didn't know what to do. And I didn't see it that way. I was like, I'm dying. I really thought I was dying. So when I saw people going through this, I was literally inboxing people all over the world. And I'm like, I'll help you find a craniosacral therapist. Like, I just wanted people to see that their bodies could help themselves. And one day it just clicked for me, like, why are you doing that? And like, what happened to your plant? Go back to school and get the craniosacral. So I did. And it was like, okay, you become that person. And at that point in time, I saw an esoteric healer. I was also seeing a doctor at the time. And she was I forget how all she picked up on her things. I know she would do muscle testing and some other things, but she was saying how my body was holding on to, as if I had the spike protein, as if I had taken the shot and I had no shot, nothing. She's like, you're vibrating, you're holding it. I was like, interesting. Because at that time I was also clotting a lot in my period. So it was really interesting because that was kind of a thing that people were saying. And I'm like,
were you doing hands-on body work at this point in time? Interesting.
Yeah. But I was going into people's. So what was funny is I was working in roofing, and this was before the shot rolled out. And the people who were totally afraid were like pissed that you were even coming to their door.
Right.
Okay. That changed like that. Once they were like, come on in. And I could just tell they were like, oh no, I got the shot. It's fine. And I would go home and I would be in pain.
Mm-hmm.
And then my periods were like really, it was like very bizarre. So for a while, yeah. And it was almost like I could tell if I had interacted with.
Yeah.
And it started with the rollout, which came out right before Christmas. We flew home to New Jersey. I was on a plane full of people who were excited to freshly have their stuff so they could travel.
Mm-hmm.
And I always synced with the full moon. I was not prepared for my period to come on this trip. And it did. And it was really heavy. And that's when all of this like clotting stuff, and that was when I began to notice this trend. Now, I don't see it now. And I don't know if it's just because it's been, but either way, I've also stopped paying attention because when I went to this doctor, she was like, you're vibrating with it because you're holding on to it. And I'm like, oh, okay. So she was like, I recommend you going to see my esoteric healer. So I saw him. And he picked up on a similar thing without even knowing that that's what she said. And he had mentioned that I had a lot of masculine energy in my life at that time. He was like, you have a son, you have a husband, you have one cat that's a female, but another that's, just.
You're roofing.
You're doing roofing and windows and, which actually I had just stopped that, but it was like a week before.
Right,
so it was
still
really
around
fresh.
that type of energy.
But it was like I was just starting to switch into doing artwork, which I think I had just met one of your friends this past week, and we did an art thing. So that's also part of my business that I honestly, it's just a small thing, but I love doing that because it brings out that feminine side, that creative flow, that
open up the sacral chakra.
Yeah, that like remembrance that we are creators. We don't have to have it all figured out. We can create beautiful things. And that honestly, doing that artwork began to shift my life. It began to, he was like, even your friends are more masculine. And I didn't have a lot of female friends at that time. So that I started going to mom group meetups and taking my son. And then it was part of women's circles. And like, I mean, now.
And now you're part of all the things. I see you popping. I'm like, okay, I talked to you like 2 weeks ago. And I'm like, now she's everywhere. Like all my friends, she's popping up in all their stuff. I love it. Yeah, you are. You're heavy on my algorithm.
Yeah, it's like my life is dominated by feminine energy now. But I called that in. It was like I was like, oh, I'm going to focus on that. And so to your point, my work started out more intuitive than scientific.
Right.
So that is still a part of my practice big time. But I find that some people are freaked out by that. And that's okay. I don't want to miss the gap for especially babies and children who are in need of this because it sounds woo-woo. So I like to present the scientific facts because I want people to know that there's something behind what we're talking about here, especially because when I'm working on people, it is so light that I think,
people are like, what are you actually doing here?
And there are times
you
I
just have your hand on my belly button. Why are you touching my stomach?
Yeah, exactly. And like, are you doing anything? And I tell people that I'm like, your feelings of what's happening will vary from like, is she actually doing anything?
I feel like
I feel all sorts of things.
My soul goes somewhere else when I do.
So many people say that. So many people say that.
It's interesting. It's like, whatever, just let the body do the work.
Yeah.
And I love that you say that because bringing in all this feminine energy, and for me, what that means is like, I feel like all females especially have such a nurturing, holistic approach. I mean, this is why we were called witches years and years ago. This is why, we know intuitively, if your child has a respiratory, like, okay, what herbs, like what steam do they need? What humidify, it's almost like it intuitively happens. So I actually went to massage school as well when I first moved to Sarasota after exercise physiology. I was like, okay, well, I want to do something that's going to kind of add to it. I hurt my clients, I can fix them afterwards, whatever. But when I was in massage school, I realized in clinic, I intuitively could feel where people needed work done and they would comment on that afterwards. However, at the time at 21 years old, I'm like, I can't do this. Like, I didn't know I was taking on people's energy. I didn't know how to protect my energy. I didn't want to touch people. It's interesting looking back now. I'm like, well, that's what it was. I wasn't protecting my energy. I wasn't cleansing. I wasn't understanding how to kind of wash away the day.
Yep.
And this goes for anything, including my big community events. It's like anything people-y. You don't have to be touching someone to take on energy.
Yep.
But I would have, people random, never knew them, never had experienced them. I could tell who's hip, and they're like, oh my God, how'd you know to get into that hip?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
And it's something intuitively that happens. So it's not like, you're a fortune telling, when people think intuition, you're like intuitive sometimes. I think it does freak people out. I think right now we're in a really beautiful era with it though, where it's much more widely accepted and welcome, and people appreciate it a lot more than we have. It's different time frames in history. But it's real. And everyone has that though.
Yeah.
If we slow down and we connect to ourselves and our bodies, and we really set ourselves up to have that mind, body, spirit connection, we can all have that level of intuition and intuitive ability, and be able to, connect with people in different ways and connect with ourselves in different ways and understand what our partners or our children or our friends and what we may need.
Yes.
It's not really, you don't have to be in the healing realm and a healing practitioner to understand. If we slow down enough, if we regulate ourselves enough by these different modalities and take care of ourselves, we can be open.
And how many times have people had a gut feeling about something and then they didn't listen? I feel like I got to a certain point in my life where it was like, okay, that I'm going to stop doing. I'm going to stop doing that, because I've noticed too many times that I've noticed it and then I didn't follow through. And that's where the internal shift of doing the craniosacral work works long term, because I think once things begin to align properly and that CSF is flowing, the work is much more than just on that table in that moment over those next few days. Like, it can be transformational months later, even sometimes years later, just because if you are continuing to abide by those body messages now, you will learn to open that up more and more, where you're like, oh, because I said no to that, look what opened up over here. Like that surrender and flow you're talking about. A lot of times we feel like we have to control something. We have to do these because, but I just have to surrender and flow and go with what actually feels good in this moment. And sometimes even lately, that applies to myself. It's just as my plate expands, where do I actually need to cut out what's not feeling like a full-on yes for me? Because if it's not feeling on a full-on yes, then why am I doing it?
Right. If that, person cancels dinner, if, something just doesn't, you're renting something and just like, oh, no, it's not going to work out. It's like just learning to trust, giving yourself permission to trust the process. Like it's not always going to be pretty in the moment. It's not always going to feel good in the moment. But I find that from my personal experience, if I take a step back and I look big picture, because usually we want to react to that moment, but is it really even in that moment that we're reacting to? Or is it our past conditioning and the things, maybe something that's happened before? It's like, well, okay, so those things back then didn't work out either, but look where you are now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And trusting, and that might not always be the best place, but just trusting that it's going to flow and staying open to receive, I think is really huge. And that's really kind of what's been coming up for me as we've been talking, is I feel like with craniosacral, you are giving people the space they need to be open to receive.
100%. Yeah. That's
and
exactly
there
what's
is
happening.
something really beautiful in that. I know for my own healing journey, until I was open to receive my own love and my own appreciation and my, hold myself accountable from the inside out and stop projecting everything about everyone. It was never about anyone
else. And do
else.
what you need to for yourself, because no one else is going to do those things that you need to for yourself. They're not going to take care of you. They're not going to give you the food you need when you need it right here. They're not going to be like, take a break.
Right.
They're going to fill up your, you're going to feel you need to fill up your schedule. You need to do, but you're also the one that has to protect you.
Right.
So
and
it's
in a
that
healthy
permission.
way of learning boundaries, not out of a flight, fear, nervous system standpoint. It's protecting from I'm in peace and balance right now. Like to me, at take 40 years old, success means peace, balance, and joy.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean hustle. It doesn't mean anything financial, to be honest. It does, because you can be in the best financial place ever, and on paper everything looks great, and you can be completely void and empty
Destroyed
inside.
Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah.
And actually, that's one of my favorite quotes from Jim Carrey. Is like, I wish that everyone could be rich and famous, so they could see that this is not what it's about.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
And so the work that you do is just beautiful, because you're creating that space for people. And tell us, so you have something pretty exciting you've announced this week that it's like epic timing, by the way. Talk about divine alignment here.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about this new venture. And
So this week I've actually brought on my husband. His name is Matthew DeQuani, and he has been practicing body work for 7 years. And he's great at all of the deep tissue, stretching, getting into those areas, and really his hands are like, so he provides that, but he's also very intuitive and gentle. He also does craniosacral. So being able to have him there, I feel like, is a great balance, because he gets to be able to give his gifts to the world. He does have so much to offer, and I am not the person to offer some of those things that I wish I could. Like, I want to get into a lot of the massage stuff I used to, and it's a big no for my body that I've had to continuously hear over and over again to go, okay, all right, I got the message. I know, yes. And it's funny enough, sorry to separate onto a different topic, but when I'm working on people, that is a message I hear often, is you don't have to do it. You don't have to do so much.
Right.
Like, stop doing so much. Because I think we think we have to, especially when I started to learn craniosacral, and I'm like learning the techniques, and I'm like, I want to do the techniques the way. And there is something to that, but how much we're getting in the way. Where's the intuition when we're so mechanical?
Right.
So I've started to get out of my way, and I start to flow with people. And I think, to your point, that's something that when I'm working on kids, I try to tell people, especially babies, they're so sensitive to their auras. So I have to be gentle with how I go into things. And sometimes on a first visit, I may not even touch their heads. And that can seem so weird for parents, because they're like, you doing craniosacral therapy? That's what I'm here for. What am I paying for?
Right.
But then when they leave and they see, they're like, oh, okay. But because I have to explain, especially for like the autistic kids that I deal with, like they're very sensitive. I have to be very mindful of what they're always in control. Every single person I'm working with is always in control, even as an infant. I can tell when they're saying no when we listen. So if they don't want me on their heads, I'm not just going to go there because that's what I can intentionally direct my energy of what I'm intending to do. And that is one thing that I've noticed is the quantum aspect of this. And it's something that John Upledger, who I went through Upledger Institute for Craniosacral, he really wanted to be very medical and get this into like every hospital so that every baby could experience this from birth. And I can totally see and appreciate his vision on that. But in order to do that, I feel like he had to leave out the woo-woo stuff. But there was a day where I thought, seems like this is more of a quantum thing. It seems like this is, just even the fact that you've created the permission for yourself and you're in a place to be able to receive, because that does make 100% of a difference. I don't have many people that are being coerced to be on my table, but I imagine that if their like wife is making them come, it's a different receptivity. Their body's not going to communicate the same way. But yeah, being able to hold that space open allows for that quantum observation effect, where you have now created that space, I have created that, and we are both tuning into the body. And it's like having somebody sit with you when you are like really sad and you don't even want to talk. You just want someone to see you. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Dr. Emoto rice experiment years ago. So we had, it's based on water and the intelligence of water. And Dr. Veda Austin, is she a doctor? Well, Veda Austin goes on to about water consciousness now, which if you haven't explored her work.
My husband just had her on his podcast on Monday.
She's amazing.
I know. I'm like, why didn't you tell me about her? Because I could have had her on mine too.
Oh my goodness.
She might still be in town.
Oh my goodness. Oh, that's so cool.
I'll have to send you the episode when it comes out. It comes out next Thursday, I think.
Please do, because her work fascinates me so much, because
it's amazing.
I feel like it plays so much into the stuff that I'm dealing with too, because we're talking about the consciousness of our CSF and of our lymph and everything that's water inside our body. And I deal a lot with frequency too. And so understanding intention and frequency and vibration is really everything. I mean, it started to make me wonder essentially. So back to Dr. Emoto, and I'll go to this. He did this rice experiment where he had a thing of rice that he divided into 3 containers, same containers, so that the experiment was the same. One, he said nothing but nasty things to for like 2 weeks. One, nothing but positive things. And one he completely ignored. And the one that was the worst, the positive one didn't look so bad. The negative one looked pretty gross, but the one that was ignored was the one that was the worst.
Because it had no connection at all.
Nothing. It is just going to show that literally our attention on anything that's conscious brings that space for it to do what it needs to do. And there's so much of our not even paying attention. So it's when we do that for ourselves, we are finally doing that for ourselves. And sometimes it just takes that. We can say we're going to cut out that time for ourselves, and then we sit down for an hour and we're distracted. You know, we're cutting out that time specifically for ourselves, and somebody else is holding that container for us as well. And that's why I think it's quantumly healing. I've noticed it doesn't matter if I'm touching you, if you're across the country. I started experimenting with that because I know Reiki can be done from a distance, but I specifically wanted to intend and be like, okay, if I'm working on people the same way, if they're sitting in front of me and I've been intending to work on certain areas, like there are things that happen to me when I'm working on someone that let me know that there's a shift happening. I mean, I see what's happening for you too, but different body things. So I thought, I'm just going to try it out. Who wants to try it out? I just woke up with this feeling one day and it was like, put it out there. Let's just see. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to see, does anybody want to do this? And I put out like 10 spots and they were filled within an hour. And I thought, okay, people are ready for this. Let's try it.
Oh, I'm down. I'm signing up. We're done.
And they all just had like these, that's amazing that you even knew that. You didn't even know I was in a car accident. Like all these things, because I'm like, again, this is an intuitive thing. So that is something I don't do as much because I've been working on the brick and mortar and you know, and it's a little harder to get into that quantum aspect with everybody. But that's why I speak more of that kind of stuff on my platform, because I do want to connect all of those pieces for people so that they can see
that they are all connected. I mean, we are all frequency. Yes. Everything that has life, energy, substance is a frequency.
Yeah.
And there is something to that collective consciousness and, you know, just surrounding. That's why it's so important to surround yourself with what fills you up and understand what doesn't. And that's a really great way to eliminate things and bring things in and learn when to protect and set boundaries and learn when to open and relax. And that's how we really, and I think, you know, making the connection not only on like a spiritual communication level, but within our own bodies. And what came up for me when you were talking about, you know, not fueling into ourselves, like an example of that is like a mom who has multiple children, who's doing so much for her children, and she's not nurturing her own body and herself as much as, you know, she has, and especially if they're back to back to back, you know, I couldn't imagine. I have 3 teenagers and a 5-year-old. So, you know, we got a 10-year gap there in between, but I can imagine having back to back to back. Like I have a girlfriend who has 7 children and she's had them in like 10 years.
Yeah, it's wild. I have one and I'm like,
how to nurture yourself through that and giving yourself permission to pour into yourself is so important. And I think that's one of the reasons she's been so successful is she gives herself that permission.
Yeah.
So if go ahead.
No, and just having that support too, because if you don't have somebody who sees you, like you had said earlier, you're like, I had to start filling my own cup. And that was something that I had to learn too. I mean, I love my partner and love you, but I'm going to put you on blast a little bit because there was a point where, you know, he was so focused on being the provider for the family, et cetera, that he didn't see all that I was doing because the masculine side of him was, you know, and his father was repeating words of, basically things that were, you're not providing income. So I'm like, but if you were to pay somebody for everything else I am providing for the family, where's my worth? So I'm sitting here feeling like I have to work even harder just so that you see me. I'm not doing that because I am going to tell myself that I am seen for who I am. I'm enough for who I am. I'm worthy for exactly how I am. And I started to fill my own cup before Miley Cyrus came out with her little song. I was buying myself flowers.
Right.
I was,
same.
You know, I'm like,
that's how my healing journey started.
Yes, because it was like, and it wasn't any kick to my husband. It was just kind of like, he wasn't in and we talk about this now because he's not in that mindset now.
Right. Same.
But he wasn't in a place of thinking that buying me flowers not a priority. Did he realize how important that would be for me? Like, it just, none of that really mattered, but it was, I'm not going to wait to feel like I'm worthy of getting some flowers. Like, I'm getting myself the flowers because I deserve them. And I'm going to get myself the cup of coffee because I deserve the coffee. And I'm going to do what I need to do because I know that I'm not overdoing it and I'm worthy of these things. And I started to just fill my cup and take time for myself, get the massages, even though he's a massage therapist, because we talk about
but it's different
getting massages, but it's like having a
yeah.
plumber husband, like the toilet's broken. Like, come on, we live at the same house.
Oh, I grew up in a contractor's house and there's still shit broken that was broken
I'm
40 years ago.
Have to outsource for stuff. Let's
it's healthy to do that too.
100%.
Because, in a partnership, you can't expect the one person to fulfill everything.
It can't be
like we have to do it for ourselves. And when we start to do it for ourselves, it allows us to be more open to receive for them people to chip in and do it as well. Yeah. And it's almost like we appreciate it more when it comes from a different place of like, well, I need this from you. But it's like, well, if I can provide this for myself, it kind of takes a load off them right now 100%. When they don't have the capacity for it. And when I started to understand that in my own marriage, I mean, that's when my husband and I started to totally shift. When we started to like in a healthy way, detach and learn, what healthy attachment is with that.
Wow.
And go on our own journeys, but then support each other at the same time. It's like, wow, you're really busting your ass in one way and I'm busting mine in another.
Yep.
And we haven't always appreciated and seen that, but now we can see it for what it is. And it's such a big picture.
And how beautiful is that? Because I remember, talking with my therapist one time and this was probably like a year or so ago. And she was like, some people marry over, several different people throughout, and some people will remarry the same person.
Right.
And I kind of feel like I was telling my husband, I feel like we're going through that. We're almost going through a different season where like, wow, we get to appreciate all that we were both doing that we couldn't see because it's hard when you're, when you're fixed on your vision, and then we tend to attach our worth and our value to somebody else of what they're capable of being able to do. But we're also, by doing that for ourselves, showing them how we want to be loved.
Right.
And our children. If he didn't want to go out to dinner, like, okay, I'm going to go out to dinner. Like, I love this restaurant and I'm craving it and I'm not going to wait 5 months till you think it's time. Like, I'll go.
And that's
it's
okay
fine.
Because alone, I take myself to lunch and to brunch all the time. I actually kind of, I feel, bless his heart, me and my husband really appreciate more alone time.
Yeah.
Like, we do.
Thank God, so do we.
Like, it's like, I think I need more alone time than every 4 people I know. And that's okay. I think it's just a season. I love it, but it allows me to decompress and set myself up for all the other stimulating parts of my life. 100%. Because I know that about myself. Otherwise, I'm coming in hot and I'm firing off. Yes.
And your body would definitely have something to say about that if you weren't.
And it still does sometimes, even if I feel like I'm balancing it.
Right. And I mean, but those are our checks and balances, and we have to have those. And at least you're aware of it and can tune it a little bit better. And I think that's the biggest part. Like when people are like, oh, are you healed now? Yes, but it didn't come as a result of like, and when I say yes, I mean, like, I'm not dealing with a lot of like the things I was dealing with, like, I can eat, I can stabilize my weight, but I also know how to take care of myself. Like I went on a trip last year to France, and this was a trip totally called, like that I still am trying to figure out, like, why did I go on this trip? I mean, don't get me wrong, I loved it. It's just, it was more of like a calling. Like, I don't even know why I'm going, but I feel like I have to go kind of thing. And it was wonderful. And I think it's definitely brought in a lot of, like, even as you had mentioned, the women are the ones who are, there for the birth. We're usually the ones there for the healing. We're there for the death. Like, I think there's a lot of that feminine energy coming in. So that trip to France was really important. But that being said, I prepped myself. I'm like, I know that I'm going to need certain things. Like, I like to sleep with my heating pad and my eye mask and my earplugs, and I have to have my certain foods. And we'll call it things that I don't notice when I'm at home, but have become the routine part of how I keep myself stable, that I had to actually intentionally think about to prepare to make sure that when I'm over there, I'm not going to be dysregulated, because I know that all it takes is that dysregulation to start what I think a lot of people who experience Vax injury as like a flare up. But what's happening is that you haven't learned how to listen to your nervous system yet. And you have to be your own parent. How would you pack your bags for your kid.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure they have everything they need. And I tell you what, I swear my intuition was totally with me on packing that trip. I packed 2 heating pads just in case. The first night, of course,
The European outlet blows it out.
blew it. Of course I did. So I'm
I've burned out a lot of steamers.
I needed to. But every little homeopathic thing I brought with me, I needed. It was like, oh my God, I packed literally everything I needed and that trip took me to the extents of what my nervous system could handle and still showed me I could do that and expand and still be okay because I had my back.
That.
And I think that was probably one of the biggest things out of that trip was to show you can become uncomfortable again and stretch as long as you can take care of yourself. Because if I don't have those things, then it's like, okay, well, I've learned a long time ago that no one else is going to know you better than you. So yeah, just do the things you need to do.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did a lot of international travel last year, and I totally feel you on that one. And there was a trip where I just I'm in Italy. I'm going to eat the pasta. I have an egg allergy. I was so bloated. I was so puffy. It was miserable, but I had so much fun. It was a yoga intuition retreat, so it was I had the best of both worlds. I'm but no, I can't. No pasta for me. And it's because of the eggs. It wasn't everyone's like, could you eat it there? I'm like, no, not the girl with the egg allergy. If I had a gluten allergy, maybe, but
right, yeah.
So. I mean, this has been, I feel like we could talk literally for 5 hours.
Yeah.
And we might have to circle back on more of the quantum stuff too. But there's a couple things you want my audience, our audience, the listeners out there, a couple different messages you just want to portray out there. What would those be? What advice, what tidbits, what peace of mind?
I would say your body's not broken. So if you are in a position of feeling that way,
even if it's chronic pain, even if it's
even if they've told you that you are, I'm here to tell you that you're not. So if you haven't explored this modality to find somebody, and not every practitioner will be the same, and it's just no different than your body has to be able to open. So I think that's important too, and just discerning who you're going to, because not everybody is good about knowing that they need to cleanse their energy and stuff too. So important. But also just to, if you have children, I think it's really imperative that we start looking at the airway stuff because that is really telling for how much their nervous systems can handle and adapt. And I think that's probably we're so adaptable. We just need to get back
to heal themselves.
Yeah. We just need to presume competence in the body and watch how that unfolds.
I love that. And so how can we find you?
Oh my goodness. Okay. So I am in Bradenton. Do I give my address on this or no? You can find me on Holistic on Instagram. Let's leave it that way. Okay. You can find me on Instagram.
You can disclose whatever you want, but
on Instagram, Holistic Alchemist. And if they have trouble finding me, they can just find me on your page. I think that's probably the best way. And on my website, holisticalchemy.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I really think we need to circle back to, there's so much I could have unpacked that I
know, my goodness. That's why I never even know what to go with. So I'm glad you were let's go all the way.
All the way. All in, all the time. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today.